The agenda is the evacuation procedure, and I have to read it out since we're now face to face. So there is a location plan of the exits and the assembly route. No, wrong. On hearing the evacuate signal, please carry out the following. Exit the building by your nearest safest exit, which is either there or there, as we know. All visitors report to assembly point G. All staff report to their designated assembly point on Woolpack Way car park. Do not leave the assembly point for any reason until told to do so by the incident controller or fire brigade officer. And we're not expecting a drill, so if you hear the alarm, we can take it as being for real. Item number 2, apologies for absence. Members away on official council business.
One apology from Councillor Simmons, and her substitute is Councillor Denise.
We have 2 last-minute apologies from Councillor Deacon, who's been attacked lots of work, and from Councillor Wilson, who's not very much.
Thank you. Disposable pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Thank you. Item number 4 is public participation. Probably no notes of any questions being received.
Jim, you actually want to move your camera?
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Just not there. Thank you.
Item 5, minutes of the meeting of the board held on the 29th of March.
Move those, Chair.
Councillor Riley, thank you. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. Item number 6 is the external auditor's report, and at this point I'll welcome Helen Henshaw, who I believe is online, to ask any questions. The report has been circulated. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Chambers.
I don't know whether we need these mics or not. It may be my ignorance about these simple reports, but the paragraphs that relate to the assessment of risk around COVID-19 and the impact on our finances talk about the potential for council to be not of going concern. And I'm not quite sure what that means or what lies behind that, or, you know, is that a routine thing to say as part of an audit, or is it just me that hasn't realised it's something that is stated every year?
I'm sorry, Councillor, I didn't quite catch all of that question. I heard the reference to COVID-19. I'm on page 22 in your pack. Is that the page you're asking the question about?
Yeah, hold on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, it is. Yes, it is that particular page, and it is that going concern phrase and what lies behind that. Whether it's standard practice to have this phrase in an audit report, which I've not seen before, or whether there is a particular background to why this is now in our report.
Okay, so I'll answer as best I can, and sort of half guessing what the question was, and hopefully if I'm too off the mark, you'll put me straight. So page 21 in your pack picks up the, page 22 in your pack picks up the discussion about going concern. Going concern is a basis of accounting which is applied to most financial statements when they're prepared, and it's effectively an underlying assumption that the organisation will continue in its current form to operate for a period of at least 12 months after the financial statements are signed. So not after the balance sheet date to which the financial statements relate, but 12 months from the period they are signed. Within the public sector, the assumption of the basis of preparation being a going concern basis of preparation is based on assumed continuity of service. So if there's an assumption that the council will continue to exist as an authority in that 12-month period, then the going concern basis of accounting would be appropriate. Given two things really, the impacts of COVID-19 and the stress that that has put on public sector finances more broadly, and coupled with that, this year there has been an introduction of increased auditing requirements around going concern because of very public corporate failures. So think Carillion, think Patisserie Valerie, for example. Additional work is required, not necessarily to say the authority is not a going concern, because we're not saying that, because there's no intention that the authority will not continue to exist in the future. It's more about, is there sufficient disclosure in the financial statement to enable your average reader of the accounts to understand the extent to which there is financial pressure on the authority, whether that be in terms of ability to pay bills as they become due, whether there's a need for additional borrowing just to fund day-to-day activities, etc. So it's that element that's reflected in the audit plan, and that's common across both public and private sector, and particularly this year. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I mean, your conclusion was that we are a going concern and that our financial accounting does take account of the risks identified by COVID-19. Is that what I've understood by that page then?
Well, we haven't reached a conclusion yet, because this is our plan, if you like. So this is informing the committee what we will consider. I can conclude at this point that it's appropriate to use the going concern basis of accounting, because, as I say, we know that the authority will continue for the next 12 months. There's no, edict from government or whatever to say that that's not going to be the case. What we haven't completed yet is a full assessment of whether the disclosures that the authority have put in their accounts about the pressures on finances over that period are sufficient. And the reason that that's not done yet is because, effectively, as I say, that 12-month period has to run for the full year at least, past the point the accounts are signed off as approved.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman. It's as much as anything on page, trying to look out what page it is, 2019, the section on materiality. And I'd like to be assured about the calculation of the gross expenditure on provision of services at 44.7 million. As much as anything, because then that sort of, by implication, sets the materiality threshold at 2% to just shy of £900,000. What makes up the 44.7 million? Because it's not a number I immediately recognise, so much as it's sort of getting towards the total turnover of the authority. That, to me, doesn't sound like the amount that we spend on the provision of services.
I haven't got the calculation in front of me right now, Councillor, I'll be honest, although that can be shared separately. But effectively, we look at the gross expenditure within the previous year's audited financial statements, and so at the cost of services line, effectively, and then we make adjustments to that number for recurring amounts of expenditure, which are broadly the same year on year, that sit below that line in the accounts. So you won't see that number as a plucked out number from the financial statements. It's an amalgamation of various numbers based on whether or not they typically move a lot year on year.
Thank you, Chairman, for that. But can I just be assured, does the 44.7 million include or exclude wages and salaries?
It includes an element of wages and salaries. It doesn't include all of the pension elements.
Chairman, my reason for asking this is, genuinely, I can understand there is an element of risk in misstatement as far as wages and salaries are concerned, but it's a relatively minor risk, in my view, compared to what we're trying to audit across the rest of what the authority does. And if we're using that number to set materiality, it strikes me that materiality has a risk of being materially either under or overstated. I'm just not sure. I mean, if this is standard practice in accounting, then, I'm quite happy to shut up. But I would have thought, looking at what we do in terms of value for money, how we provide stuff to our electorate and everything else, I'm just not sure why we're including wages and salaries, accepting exclusion of pension contributions in the gross expenditure on provision of services calculation. Now, okay, I agree. You have to spend the salaries to deliver the services, but it's not something I would have thought that we are particularly focusing on in terms of an audit, and therefore it strikes me that it's actually overstating the materiality threshold.
I'm going to bring. Bear with me, Helen. I'll
Would
bring
you like
you
to come back on that, Chair?
Well, Chairman, my only suggestion was perhaps if we could ask Anthony for a note, a short note, just Alan has said that she has the details in front of her. But perhaps we can ask them if they're going to provide a note after that.
I can answer that. Sorry to interrupt. I can answer that specific question without the details, though. It is absolutely industry practice to include the payroll, for want of a better phrase, the payroll expenditure in total expenditure. And the reasoning behind that is, I think I've just been kicked out of the meeting.
You're still here with us, Helen.
Sorry, I think I just got thrown out of the meeting briefly then. It is industry practice to include the payroll expenditure within the total expenditure used to calculate materiality. It is also industry standard practice to use total expenditure as the materiality driver for a local authority. The reason being the generally accepted view is that the figure that's of most interest to the users of the accounts is the total expenditure incurred by the council, because that is the total taxpayers' money effectively, which is being expended. That element of the pensions, which is removed from that calculation, is effectively the actuarial type movements which go through the income and expenditure statement, as opposed to the actual cash that leaves the authority's bank account. Hopefully that makes it more clear.
Thanks, Chair. It does, but I'm every year I have an issue in terms of translating this to what a member of the public would perceive and how they assess, if you will, the level of materiality compared to the services that are actually provided. And I think if you look at the authority's expenditure accepting wages and salaries, which I think there are multiple levels of control over already and levels of assurance on, not least the fact that it is checking that pay every month when they get it. 895,000 as a level of materiality basically takes out just about everything that's left.
Would you like to comment, Helen? Are you still with us, Helen?
I am. I struggled to hear a lot of that. I apologise.
Perhaps to move us on, if the chief executive or the director of finance tomorrow could raise those issues with our auditor and give us an answer after the meeting. It's not something that I've only raised at this meeting, so it's not going to be critical if I don't get an answer tonight. But I would like to understand it better.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Yeah. Did you hear that, Helen? Well, basically, with the Director of Resources, Chief Exec, come with the questions for a response from you in the forthcoming days.
And next time we could have attendance in person so that we can communicate.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Yes, absolutely fine.
Thank you. Hopefully see you face to face next time.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Daniels.
So can I just ask where that leaves us with respect to this recommendation here, which is we request that the Executive Board confirm its understanding of an agreement to these materiality and reporting levels. It sounds like we're not quite there yet, and we need either as an Executive Board to delegate that or to come back to it, given Councillor Simpson's questions.
So I'm grateful for Councillor Chambers' assistance. A lot of members would say I've never been quite there yet for some time, but I am happy because I think that this is in line with what we've done in previous years. I'm just trying to understand it better. So I'm happy, and perhaps if the answers could be circulated to all members of the board so that they can equally be as content as they might be.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Thank you, Councillor James. The intricacies of audit, and you know, to be perfectly frank, I think you have to be an accountant to understand the details.
That's why I was asking you.
Yes, I guess I am in that privileged position of being able to understand everything that's going on. But I think, as Councillor Simpson said, you know, it is broadly in line. Well, it's not broadly; it is in line with audits every other year. So we'll get the details circulated to all members, but we're happy to approve the recommendation. I'll propose it from the chair and seconded by Councillor Simpson. Thank you. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance, Helen, if you can hear me.
I can. For some reason, it's cleared up now, so I don't know what that was. Sorry.
Because we finished.
It must be, yeah.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you very much.
Ed Fielder's comment to say he's broken down on the way. Please record his apologies. He hasn't been able to get the phone signal.
Right.
Joe, could I ask if that is what sort of breakdown that is? Is it mental or physical or vehicle?
I think it's car breakdown.
Chip shop.
One might lead to the other, friends.
Can we record that apology then, Amanda, please? Yeah, it is a nightmare. I mean, that leads us to a whole new debate about improving that phone signal. We talk about super fast broadband, and we talk about 5G, and yet you can't even get a phone signal between here and Coleshill, can you, Jodie? In Harley, or anywhere like that. Just about, if you stand on top of the church in Forlongley, you can just about get it.
I think it's quite ironic when you sit at the top of that hill, but you can see, excuse me, the telephone tower in the middle of Birmingham. You can't get a signal.
Anyway, let's get back to the agenda. Item number 7 is Budgetary Control Report 2021-22, period ending 30th of June 2021. This looks at the financial position of the services of the board. The majority of the current underspend relates to changes in the timing of the work on the LDF. Any, Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Joe. I'd just like to understand section 4.1 better, particularly given that the local fund process is actually going to impose. How much of a high impact and high likelihood does that have on our budget going forward?
I'm going to bring Sue in. Thank you.
Clearly, once we get the local plan confirmed, then the risk will reduce. Although, given that the local plan is a bit of an ongoing process, it's arguable how much it reduces, I guess. But certainly, when we were setting the budget, we weren't quite in this position, so that's why it remained as high at that time.
So I understand that, Chairman. So this is historic as opposed to, if you like, current. What I'm concerned about is one of the current risks.
With regard to the LDF?
Well, generally, I mean, in section 4, we're talking about the risks of the budget. I accept that those might have been at the time the budget was set, but I don't see this report as being one that purely tells us about historic information. So the risks must change.
Yes.
So yeah, I think, I mean, historic might mean data publication, because at that point we didn't have the local plan so that released to us. And so, you know, I don't think we wanted to assume how members would vote in September, and hopefully when it comes to get more accounts. So that's probably certainly an accurate reflection when it comes out. It may creep down to medium if the local plan is adopted and we go into a new cycle. But of course, you then just be at the start of the new cycle as opposed to the end of the old one. So it probably goes no further down. So
To an extent, Chairman, it does. And I'm sorry to labour, but what I'd like this section of the report to tell me is, have the risks to the budget varied over the time since it was set, and what is it now? If you like, putting it bluntly, what is the key risks to the budget for the rest of the financial year? Is what I'm trying to get at here.
I'm sure the key risk to the budget is still the LDA, but
Chair, if I may, I mean, it's absolutely right that this was done at the time the budget was set, and to be fair, I would imagine most of our risks don't really change very much during the course of the year. But you're absolutely right. Some of them do. So I would take your comments on board, and when we bring the next report, I will try to do that assessment.
Thank you. I'm only asking that I noticed before I came in that the NHS had been given a pay increase which was materially in excess of what we budgeted here, and I don't know if that has any implications for our staff.
I don't think there are any plans certainly by the LDA to award a
3% it was, wasn't it?
higher than inflation.
To be fair, Chair, if I could just come in on that, the negotiations are very much still in progress on local government help. So I'm afraid there's not a lot I can say at that. Clearly, negotiators do take account of what else is going on in the pay market, but we're still very much in negotiation.
Thank you, Chair.
And further questions? If I'll move the recommendation from the Chair, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. Item number 8, capital accounts 2021. The proposed methods of funding of capital expenditure in 2021 are set out in the report. Any comments, queries, questions? There are none, so I shall move that again from the Chair, seconded by Councillor Riley. Thank you. All those in favour? Again, that's unanimous, thank you. Excuse me, item number 9 is the capital programme. This report gives some information on the capital work undertaken during 2020-21 and requests to carry forward on some schemes for 2021-22. Councillor Gosling.
Can I ask about the energy saving measures which haven't been carried forward? £294,000 and what the drop figure is for and why it's comparable? In the HRA, is it? I didn't know if that was part of the green greenhouse.
I can't be categorical, I'd have to confirm it for you, but I suspect that is probably the case because we've managed to draw in some external funding. Although we're match funding, we hope that we can reduce our own contribution, so it may well be that the external funding has come in. But I can confirm that for you.
Councillor, excuse me, Chambers.
Yes, just under paragraph 3.3, this obviously is 2020. After we declared a climate emergency, it talks about the housing vehicle replacement programme. My question is really, what type of vehicles did we purchase? 12 new Ford Transit Couriers along with 3 Ford Transit vans. Did we make any headway in terms of reducing our carbon emissions through that investment?
Chair, I'm not sure I have the technical expertise to really answer that one. Certainly our transport section do look at the alternatives out there. It is very much a balance of vulnerability against what we'd like to do. But certainly Richard and his team do try and bring in better, more green vehicles as and when they can. They won't be the all singing, dancing stuff. We can't afford those, unfortunately. But we do try and bring in more efficient vehicles as we replace.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just record my thanks to Keith Evans, Borough Council, for the works the water on car park, which I referenced in paragraph 8.9. It's an excellent example of the Borough Council and County Council working in partnership to improve public spaces, particularly around car parking, and clearly highly relevant to the debate going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I don't see any hands, so I should move the recommendation from the chair, seconded by Councillor Bell this time. All those in favour, please show. Again, that is unanimous, thank you. Item number 10 is the annual governance statement. A review of the council's governance arrangements for 2020-21 has been undertaken, and the resulting annual governance statement is attached for approval. Any comments or questions? Everybody's happy. So again, I'll move the recommendation from the chair, seconded by Councillor Simpson. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is unanimous again. Item number 11 is the appointments to boards. Following Councillor Rose ceasing membership of the Labour Group, it's been decided to review the membership of the boards and allocation seats based on the council's previous convention of doing so when a member leaves the group and continues as an independent. The report contains a table setting out the proposed membership and allocations. So I know there's an alternate proposal from the Labour Group,
Yeah.
And as discussed prior to the meeting, I suggest because this is a recommendation for full council, it's a full council, so if we move this recommendation and then your amendment can be heard to full council, if that's okay.
Chair, just add that it is in the papers as recommended to board, so if we just record that we're going to change that to recommendation to council, so that was a mistake before the meeting. We can just simply do that by recording this recommendation to council and not leave back up.
We don't need to minority report.
The same job stuff.
No, because that's it. Actually, we're referring it to full council for decision. Thank you. So all those in favour, I'll move that recommendation from the chair, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Item number 12 is the progress report on achievement of corporate plan and performance indicator targets April 2020 to March 2021. This is the year-end report of the corporate plan and performance indicator targets for the aforementioned year. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman. There's just a couple I'd like to have a bit more information on. The one shown as, I think, 15. We're talking about establishing a North Yorkshire flooding pool. I generally don't understand how COVID delayed that, but I would like to have a date by which it will be done. There are significant parts of my ward, and I know your ward, Chairman, that are subject to flooding. And we're getting towards a time where flooding will become more of a problem. I say that accepting the fact that there has been a spate of flash flooding across the country in the last couple of weeks. We really can't delay this, and we need to move on with it. Secondly, Chairman, the one shown at item 62, where we're talking about a sub-regional planning policy framework for sustainable construction. Chairman, I was happy enough for a sub-regional planning policy framework on standards of construction, but I'm distinctly unhappy and uncomfortable with this being picked up with joint work on spatial planning, and where seemingly the work programme for the joint spatial planning work has now been drafted and being progressed by the CSW group of planning officers. This authority is responsible for its own planning, and in the past are still bearing the scars of the last lot of spatial regional planning. And this smells distinctly like a backdoor method of reintroducing spatial planning across the West Midlands as a whole. And I genuinely don't like it. if we are talking about how we build sustainable buildings, that's a national issue, and it shouldn't make any difference to the quality of buildings. This does not smell like we are just looking at space, at how we build and use modern methods of construction anymore. Could I be assured as to exactly what we're doing with the CSW group of planning officers?
I'm going to bring in Steve.
Yes, just on the first point in terms of the flood forum, that's noted, and we'll get a further note in particular around the date in which that will be done. In terms of the planning issue 62, you have my assurance that this is not policy setting. What the officers are doing is evidence research and the various assessments. So we do set our own planning policy. We're not in our own discrete planning area. We are in a housing market area, for example, with Coventry, Warwickshire, and also Greater Birmingham. So this is only what we've done before in terms of that background building blocks, if you like, to establish what our housing need is in the context of that wider housing market. You will retain your own right to decide which kind of policies you seek to adopt. Otherwise, this is just a background work to tell you what the market signals are doing, what the best data and all that sort of stuff.
Well, Chairman, if I'm slightly concerned, that's giving me the willies completely. We all know, don't we, that as soon as planning officers start talking about the evidence base and how we've collated the evidence, that's a short step to saying you have to adopt this policy.
If I may, Jen, it's how we've done the local plan since I've been at the authority, because we can't just assess our own need. We have to assess it within the context of the housing market area. Right, and does the plan.
And I think members are well aware of that, Chairman. That's what's leading to concern.
Happy to continue the conversation. I'll think more detail offline, but we can't bring you the suggestions of policy without knowing what the evidence is, and we can't bring the evidence just on an Warwickshire basis. So that's all the Coventry Solid Warwickshire Group are doing. So it's done the core strategy and this local plan.
Chairman, I absolutely agree. But it's a question of how you answer the question, how you phrase it, who compiles the information, and just how far you are predetermined in terms of what the policy might be. So genuinely, I am very, very concerned with this.
Well, yeah, whilst I share your concern, I'm also assured that that any response that leaves this council to any consultation or to strategy, etc., have the members' approval of the response. So I hope you can take some assurance or some comfort from those comments. Seeing as you, when it comes to planning, will lead the response to anything to do with planning, spatial strategy. It won't be me.
I don't think it was me, Chairman, but it's going to be my colleague sitting over there through LDF that will be doing it. But I generally, we've been here before, haven't we? The Gypsum Traveller study was perfectly reasonable. It's perfectly reasonable going out to get information, and it's perfectly reasonable led to a policy that none of us really wanted.
Okay.
So, Chairman, I'm happy enough for now. But I would like us to, stick to what the target was, which was to talk about sustainable buildings, not anything else. And I don't remember, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember us agreeing mission creep from what the action was. I'd like us to address the action and deal with it, the same as I would on the flooding issue. And I really would like a report in some detail about where exactly we're going with the rest of it.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I'm sure, I'm absolutely assurance that will be forthcoming.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Councillor Riley, do you want?
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation about 47 and the number of people killed and seriously injured on the roads in North Warwickshire. I've been to a couple of meetings now where Warwickshire County Council has celebrated the reduction in the number of serious injuries and fatalities across the county. Clearly, that does not play out in North Warwickshire, where, despite the fact that in the first half of last year, vehicle traffic on our roads and our motorways is significantly reduced. As you'll see, we only saw a reduction in two serious injury and fatal accidents, which in the context of the county is a disaster. So I am pleased that this indicator continues to be on our performance framework, and trust that this body and the council will fully support me in all efforts to make our roads safer, because it doesn't feel as though all partners are taking Northwich safety seriously.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Yes, we've got my assurance of that. Councillor Gosling.
I'm going to echo concerns about the flooding and about the care signs on the road, and the fact that our statistics have remained reasonably static. But on a more general note, it's obviously a very COVID interrupted report, and seeking reassurances that even if the worst case scenario is that, we're only one new strain away, one new variant away, whatever, from having to have similar issues, that we will be able to be more effective in future, so that we don't have kind of the COVID excuses, again, not COVID excuses, but reasons for disrupted services. So when you're kind of looking at 75% on reds on the kind of performance indicators, it's obviously not a positive picture. And while we accept that there was disruption, are there things in place to avoid it if it should happen again?
Well, Councillor Gosling, I'm going to have to take you to task on that, because it seems to me that you are suggesting that the global pandemic that we have just are hopefully coming out of, in some way being used as an excuse for not carrying out the business of the council. And yet I have to say that the business of the council, I think our officers have worked tirelessly to keep the vital services going, despite the many challenges that we as a council face. So to criticise the performance of the council, and I quote, because you've used COVID as an excuse, I think is, quite frankly, shocking to say the least. And I think rather than criticising, I think we should be thanking our officers for keeping the vital services of the council going. I'm talking refuse and recycling, the finance, the IT, vital services, which has enabled this borough to continue those services, and as important, to administer and to pass on the grants from the government to help the population, the residents and the businesses of the borough. So, frankly, I think your comments were shocking.
I apologise for the word excuse. I may mean reasons, and I accept that they are valid reasons. However, looking forward to the future, do we have enough resilience in place to avoid disruption in the future?
Well, absolutely, because I refer you to the comments I made some moments ago, that despite the pandemic, etc., our officers have kept this council going extremely well and efficiently and effectively.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to endorse what you said about the efforts of our officers. At times, I wondered how they kept going through the last 18 months, and certainly recognise all the efforts gone in. I think one of the difficulties we have when we've got let's call it a rigid performance framework of this sort, is that the new objectives and tasks that actually have sprung up and emerged as a result of the pandemic are not properly reflected in this framework. So we're not, in a sense, assessing the entire performance by trying to hold indicators, targets, and assess whether they're red, amber and green, because actually we're not looking at the totality of what this council has been about over the last year. So it may be that what we need is almost this kind of quarterly refresh of what is it we actually want to achieve, what are the indicators of delivery, so that would then allow, in the event of new changes, new requirements, new challenges coming on, for us to be a bit more flexible about the way we report on our performance in the future. But I do endorse what you said about the efforts that officers have made.
Thank you. I mean, I have to say again that I think the very fact that the performance indicators show on the very whole either green or amber is testament that we have kept the other services and everything going pretty well, as well as dealing with the things I've already mentioned. So I know what you say, and we strive as an administration together with our officers to sort of get back on track so we can concentrate on just the core issues of the council. Clearly there's going to be a little bit of an aftermath to the pandemic, but we are focused, as we have been throughout the pandemic, on trying to keep everything going, but at the same time in parallel to keep on track. Thank you. So I will, has anybody got any more questions? There are none, so I'll move the recommendation from the chair, seconded by Councillor Simpson. All those in favour? That was unanimous again, thank you. Item number 13, Local Development Scheme LDS, July 2021. So this report brings a regular update of the Local Development Scheme, which sets out the timetable for production and adoption of the main planning policy documents the Borough Council will prepare over the next 3 years. The LDS replaces the October 2020 version, updates the timeline for production of the local plan, Gypsy and Traveller development plan documents, and a number of supplementary planning documents. Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, John. I understand that we do adopt these regularly, but I think it'd be helpful for us to understand specifically what in points 1 to 10 and the following pages have actually changed in this one, because I can't pick it out. And specifically, and I know I asked this the last time we did a change to this, could I be advised over what exactly has happened on item 5? Because the last time I can recall, we considered the community infrastructure levy. It's about 3 years ago. And we didn't get anywhere with it. We'll decide to adopt it or not. And I'll be happily corrected by Councillor Wiley if his group has considered the CIL further since then, but it was some years ago that I recall.
Yeah, it helps know we haven't given any serious consideration to the reduced levy at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Does that answer your question?
Well, it tells me
one question.
It tells me that part 5 is wrong. But what else has changed within the document?
Dorothy can help if.
I'll bring Dorothy in.
In terms of SIL, it was something that we had reported. It was a draft report. There was a previous version of it as well. When we submitted the local plan, we then expected a quick adoption of the local plan, shall I say? And so that's why it was put on the back burner, so to speak, subject to the adoption of the local plan. So it's always been there or thereabouts, but we've never taken it forward anymore because we still have not adopted the local plan. Once we've adopted the local plan, we'll then reassess the up-to-date situation in terms of SIL and Section 106 and see whether it is actually feasible, because there is a lot of talk about the actual costs of implementing a SIL process. So we just need to have a refresh of all of that and to look into that in detail. But we will bring back board reports at the relevant time.
Yeah, Chairman, so if I could just understand, I mean, generally the last conversation we had on SIL was, to the best of my knowledge, the areas where we could potentially look at having a community infrastructure levy were on the exact sort of developments that we did not wish to add it to, whereas the developments that we thought would be appropriate, such as logistics site and B8 uses, we were being told that we couldn't add SIL. So I'd be looking for significant change from that position, which I don't think there has been any, before it'd be actually worth doing anything on it. But I'm happy to leave that for a future date. But what I would like to know is what is the change in 1 to 10?
Dorothy.
Yeah, the main change here is just to update the fact that we are putting a date in for the adoption of the local plan. So we are actually saying that we are seeking to adopt the local plan by this September, because that previously was early 2021 was the exact word, were the words in the document. And so the table at the table that follows actually it also indicates that as well, that it is September. And in order to adopt a local plan, you need to have an up-to-date local development scheme. So that's why we've got this as a precursor to the actual adoption of the plan, because this has to be in place and adopted before you can actually adopt the local plan.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman. So I presume that all the other dates in Appendix A are current.
Sorry, I should have said that the other dates in Appendix A have all moved forward. So, for example, they were saying for the Gypsy Traveller that we were going to be out for consultation during the summer. But what we're now saying is that will be the winter of 2021. So, and the dates of the SPDs as well, we've moved those on as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Just on the SPDs, I'm not sure whether this is the right place to bring it up. I mean, have we got any flexibility on this? Is this dictated now by the local plan? And if so, at what point can we add a health and wellbeing SPD? Two, we've talked about it quite a lot in the past, and I know some, I think it's Stratford District or one of them from the south have already got one that we could perhaps base ours on. So have we lost the opportunity to do that, or can that be done at some point soon?
Dorothy.
In terms of the local development scheme, the council is allowed to update the local development scheme at any time. There isn't anything to say or any time limit to say that we can't update the local development scheme. At the moment, these are the SPDs that have been identified, but if at any stage members wish that to be changed, then we can look into that, because I know some local councils have done climate change ones as well, but they've actually now realised that they can't do those as SPDs. They've actually had to move those into planning policy documents. So in the top part of that Appendix A, but there is the flexibility there if and when required.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I think the questions have nicely demonstrated that this is very much an evolving piece of work, isn't it? And it will continue to evolve when we go through the various reviews that are set up for the process. I would just like to recognise the fact that the planning inspector has this week, as everybody knows, reported back that our plan is sound. It has been a long journey without any doubt, not helped by COVID, but would recognising that there are one or two issues that we need to improve on and to develop, recognise the work of the officers in getting the plan to this stage, because it has certainly been a complex and complicated journey. We have a plan that is robust, even though it has faced changes in national planning policy framework decisions on one, if not possibly two, with the new amendments that I understand are out today. So thanks to our officers. Good news that the plan is ready, and let's get down to some of the work of getting these development sites developed in consultation and in support with local communities to make sure that Warwickshire thrives and prospers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman. Given all of what's just been said by the officer and by the Chairman of LDF, I might take it that we are taking forward Councillor Bell's suggestion on a further SPD.
Well, I think that's what I've heard.
Propose, then that would be great.
I'll second.
That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, so the included in the recommendation, that the local development scheme is approved, is an addition that an additional SPD for health and wellbeing.
Yeah, we can supplement. I mean, there are a number of these SPDs, not least of all the employment SPDs that will talk about the economic development strategy, monitoring of completions and so on. So yeah, we'll certainly bring it in, but it will be one of a number of pieces.
Are you going to put a proposal forward, because it's one piece of work I'd like to see in there, and then the others can follow?
So we're going to add that to the recommendation.
Thank you.
That a health and wellbeing SPD is established or is included.
I think the only thing that I would ask, Chair, sorry to speak without being was just a bit of clarity about where we are, because we know that with health and wellbeing for North Warwickshire, the agenda is huge, and I think one of the common recommendations from the health assessments for North Warwickshire have been around access to mental health services. So because the health agenda is so big, I think it might be helpful if, as we go forward, we can work out specifically what it is that we mean within the health agenda, as opposed to the whole health agenda.
No, absolutely, Councillor, right. I mean, I think I will leave it in the very capable hands of our chair of C&E and you as the chair of LDF to come up with a policy to bring forward. Councillor Chambers.
I was wondering whether we should broaden this recommendation to something like that the local development scheme is approved, and that further SPDs, in particular the one for health and wellbeing, be progressed as part of the LDS over the next 12 months. I mean, I'm conscious, and I absolutely support what Councillor Bell has said about SPDs for health and wellbeing, and in some authorities it has been, for example, about the number of takeaways in an area related to obesity, and it is about a planning document that has some weight and merit when it comes to planning approvals. So I think they are important documents, and we do need to ensure that there is a list, not just about health and wellbeing, but about climate change. And I think the challenge of what specifically is relevant in terms of a local development scheme as an SPD is an important one, which we should give some thought to.
Yeah, I support that, but I go back to my point that we've got to be really clear about the health services that we are trying to support through planning and development, because the enormity of the health risk agenda is developed. Who knows the portfolio holder for what should be undeliverable for us as a local authority at the local level. So if we can have some priorities to work towards, that would be hugely helpful.
Can I just finish this conversation by saying one thing? But we're not trying to address the whole health agenda through here, but the wider determinants of health are now well recognised, and planning stroke housing is one of them that affects people's health. So it would be a document that says, in what way can we make these wider determinants of health better through our planning process, specifically through this planning process. That's what it's about. So, we could do something.
Councillor Simpson, and then.
Thank you. I should just, I suppose, declare a personal interest in the proliferation of fast food and obesity units across the borough, and also say that as far as my personal health is concerned, whenever we seem to discuss these, it also has a detrimental effect on my blood pressure. But I think Councillor Riley's making a valid point. You can get too bored with this, and it has to be meaningful. But I think that is something that will be the subject of the debate over what the SPG should actually say. But from my secular planning perspective, one of the things that I think we do genuinely need to address is how we can consider further applications for care homes. And there's a general comment as well as a specific comment here. because I am aware that in certainly one part of the borough, the available NHS provision on mental health has been almost entirely taken up by the consent that we granted some years ago, which has now been developed without appropriate provision for mental health provision in its borough. So we need to be acutely clear when we're granting consent what demands on the existing provision is going to be made and how that is going to be addressed. So if, for example, we were looking at an ordinary application, we'd want to be assured that it wasn't going to overburden sewage and other services. What we have in some of these applications is an unclear level of need, and that can have, and certainly in one case in Coleshill certainly has had, a detrimental impact to provision of services on the existing supply.
Chief Executive, do you want to?
Yes, just to take us forward in terms of, I suggest the next stage is that a report at some point comes to the LBF panel around what the scoping of anaerobic EPDs to address that issue in terms of what isn't in the scope. But from my understanding of these things, health impact assessment requiring that in terms of major applications is the core of that, so that we are addressing the health impacts of the development issue. So happy with that wording, and we'll take up the report to the scope of that.
Okay, thank you. So I'll move the recommendation from the chair. So it is that the local development scheme is approved and there is work done on formulating SPD for health and wellbeing. So I'll move that from the chair, seconded by Councillor Bell. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Item number 14 is the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Plan Review Issues and Options 2021 consultation. You members will be aware that the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council adopted their local plan in 2019, and that they are now undertaking a review of that plan, and this report informs members of their issues and options. Consultation which closes on the 6th of August. Any comments or queries? I think I'll say that it's a little bit, obviously they're looking for a response from us as a consultee. I think it's fair to say that it's reasonably difficult to give a response because we're still somewhat unclear as to what their review is, the details of their review. I think it's fair to say. But I am minded. Does anybody have any comments or queries? Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite concerned about Nuneaton Bedworth withdrawing from the memorandum of understanding. And from the report, genuinely, I don't understand what the implications of that are for North Warwickshire. Something in the back of my mind says that at the beginning of the MOU, it started by saying that all of the bodies together agreed to delivery of the target. If Nuneaton Bedworth withdraw from that, does that unilaterally increase everybody else's obligation? I generally don't think it does, but I want to be assured of that. And just a wider understanding of what the potential change to the MOU is. I think this conversation what ahead is that again is looking forward rather than where we are now. And what does all of this mean in reality for us?
Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. So the broad answer is no, it doesn't. The MOU is incorporated into their local plan. So therefore they would have to withdraw their local plan to have that effect on housing. Yeah, I think what Nuneaton and Bedford Council are signaling is that they're unhappy with the MOU, not least because of the criticism that was made on the statistical basis of it. This report from the statistics regulator, and signaling that as they go forward, that they would seek the new that block of evidence that we talked about earlier to not be drawn on the same basis. So it doesn't change the basis of the current settlement, if you like. It's very much the council signaling that they may be arguing things to be done different. But that's
yeah. Councillor Simpson, sorry.
Chairman, as ever, I'm greatly relieved that the chief executive has been involved. But I would like to understand more how this change. I mean, at the time the MOU was undertaken, there were a series of meetings involving members and officers from all the constituent authorities. I generally think those who are left should regroup and understand what the implications are. At the time, as I remember, this authority provided a significant amount of assistance to Nuneaton Bedworth in actually getting themselves into a situation where they could go forward. I generally am assured by the committee it doesn't have implications for us, but I really would like us to be walked through that so that we can all deeply understand what the implications are here and what implications there might be for the next round of plan. And particularly, if an authority is going to start ripping up past agreements, well, why can't the rest of us do it? Because there's plenty of stuff in there I don't.
Thank you. Before Councillor Chambers, did you have a question?
Well, yes, I mean, I was just trying to read the wording actually says they propose to withdraw from the memorandum of understanding. It doesn't, I mean, it's very clear that what the chief executive has said, well, they're not going to do that. It's actually not what's written here. And I am quite confused about the changing context around duty to cooperate, the MOU, and the knock-on effects in terms of our own local plan and the basis on which we've been accommodating numbers from elsewhere, etc.
Chair, for a minute, the distinction is that I didn't say they weren't coming out of the MOU. What I said they're not doing is abandoning their local plan. So their declaration that they want to come out of the MOU is largely that, declaratory, because it is encompassed, the thing that was agreed in the MOU is encompassed in their local plan. So they are signalling that they would have done things differently, and that on moving forward, that they will need to be satisfied that the problems with the MOU are satisfied as we go forward. So, as Councillor Simpson says, there does need to be further meetings as we agree this, and that is what will happen in the autumn. The current HECNA is due to be discussed in the autumn. It'll come here as well as those joint meetings. So they are seeking to come out of the MOU, but that will not take any immediate effect because their local plan codifies that. They're not abandoning their local plan, so therefore that will continue. It's about going forward in terms of that they will seek a slightly different solution. We'll have to see what that means in practice as to whether we agree with it.
Yeah, and before I bring Councillor Bell, as everybody's well aware, I'm no expert in planning, but from my understanding, the only way it could have a possible detrimental impact on this borough is if they were to scrap their local plan, which is not, as the chief executive said, it's my understanding that they're not doing that. They're reviewing to look at the detail and maybe change some of the detail, but that seems to me somewhat more difficult to change something that's already been adopted. If you really want to change anything, it would appear to me that you have to scrap it and start again.
And if I may, I think the implications for Nuneaton, or in any authority, withdrawing its plan will probably be felt mostly in that area.
Yes.
And just confirm, and I'd be grateful for some nods from Dorothy. We didn't take any housing in respect of Nuneaton, in terms of or single housing. It was part of that overall mix that they took some from Coventry, as we to a certain extent. Our greatest duty to operate act was, if I'm putting that way, was from the Greater Birmingham housing market. See, Jonathan, nothing at least.
Yes, I can confirm that the greater number was the Greater Birmingham HMA, and the Coventry and Warwickshire figure was, I think it was 540 units over the plan period. So nowhere near as significant as the figures that Nuneaton and Bedworth took.
I've got Councillor Bell and then Councillor Simpson.
Just for clarity then. So what Doris has just said is more or less where my concern is. So just for clarity, because the figures hopefully are in their local plan, coming out of the memorandum of understanding does not mean they have to deliver fewer houses, or does it? And so because of what Dorothy said, because we didn't take that many from Coventry, but Nuneaton did. So my concern was that we get passed on their Coventry houses. You're saying that can't happen. A, that can't happen. And B, Nuneaton and Bedford are still going to have to deliver the same number of houses with or without the MOU. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yes. Is that right, Dorothy?
Yes, because they have an adopted plan, and it's a newly adopted plan, so 2019, all those developers and landowners have all working towards the delivery of those allocations. If they said now we are going to withdraw our plan, well, they'll be doing a lot of planning by appeal, because they won't only just get then the allocated sites coming forward, they'll get other sites coming forward as well, because they will just get inundated by applications. And so the long-term effect for us is that with the update of the HEDNA, so that relates to housing and employment, that will then give us a new basis in terms of the negotiations of an updated MOU. In terms of ourselves, we've always got to remember that we have pushed our housing figures to the maximum. And so for us, if we took any more, it would be a substantial issue for us because of the infrastructure and everything else. And I think to be in a situation, well, I don't think we would or could be in a situation where we could potentially take more housing. They may try that, but I don't think we're anywhere near that.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's absolutely clear, and I agree, that in the allocation, broadly, I think it was Stratford and ourselves that were assisting Birmingham's numbers, and Rugby, Warwick and Nuneaton, I think, were broadly assisting Coventry's numbers. So in theory, Nuneaton's withdrawal and potential failure, if you like, has more implications for others. But that's not my point. My point is, within the MOU, there was a collective agreement for all of the constituent authorities to address all of the problem. I don't think there's, admittedly, it's several years since I read it, but I don't think it was quite as clear. It was much broader that all the authorities together were working to deliver the result. How we allocate the numbers, I don't think is quite that crystal clear and concise. If you like, I'm trying to say the clarity isn't there that I'm hearing. What I do understand is it's all about delivery. And to an extent, I'm with our officers in their argument that, you know, if they withdrew their plan, well, actually, that would be helpful to everybody, other than the need of Bedworth, because then they would fight and lose every battle based on the fact they haven't a plan, they haven't got a housing delivery target, and therefore it would be the most stupid thing they could do. But if they don't deliver the houses, and as this is saying, I think they are more along the lines of being less likely to than more likely to. What is the implication for the rest of us if they don't deliver?
Okay. Chief Exec.
If I go at that and see how much Dorothy agrees with me. So I think it's an issue of chronology in terms of actually the MOU has more or less come to the end of its useful life, because depending on whatever this council decides to do in September, all councils would then have adopted a local plan in accordance with that MOU. So that's the sort of end of the line for that. The issue of delivery is always an issue, but generally, if one borough doesn't deliver its local plan targets, then the pressure for that comes within that borough. So their view on the MOU, because they're not doing anything with their local plan, they're not abandoning it, shouldn't have any direct impact on delivery. Whether delivery happens or not, it will depend on whether or not the governments come forward on the sites that they've been allocated and convenient partnerships. A signalling of a view on MOU will have no impact on that. There will be delivery challenges, just as there will be delivery challenges in this borough everywhere. But it's not linked at all to a view about the MOU, because the MOU once and if we have an on-down local plan, will then be passed on to those local plans, the abandonment of those local plans.
Joe, that there's a significant amount of comfort in what the Chief Executive just said. But I still think that we should have a meeting, a further meeting, with all the residual constituent members of the signatories to that agreement to properly understand what is required. But we should have a more detailed briefing. And I think it is beholden on us within the recommendation to express our concern to the legal members that they are undertaking this decision unilaterally without consultation with their colleagues. And it genuinely, I have to say, sends a significant amount of concern to me over the other undertakings we have within the legal members. And the fact that they can pull out of one, they can pull out of a number of others just as quickly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Simpson.
Sure, if I may, you've got some comments there which you can add to. It does include our disappointment, but certainly we can add more emphasis to it in line with Councillor Simpson's point. Now, I suggest you would take that.
Thank you. You happy with that, Councillor Simpson? Right? Any other comments, questions? No. Okay, so I'll move that recommendation from the chair, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. Thank you. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 15 is the South Warwickshire local plan scoping and call for sites consultation 2021. Councillor Chambers.
I've come to this cold, as I'm sure other members have, and it is quite difficult to get your head around what this scoping and call for sites consultation is actually about. But I wonder, in terms of the observations, whether trying to simplify what those are might help in terms of understanding. If I illustrate with reference to paragraph 3.4, and I won't read it all out, but I read that entire paragraph, and at the end of it, and I read it 3 times, I just couldn't understand what that paragraph was saying or what it really meant in terms of the sub-regional need to do this together and work across the boundaries of our 2 authorities. And I'm struggling really in terms of even being able to comment on this, because a lot of it is so obscure in terms of what we're saying that frankly I couldn't really make any judgment about what we've got in front of us.
You're not alone, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to recognise the comments made at 3.5 and also at 4.2 in terms of ensuring this assessment properly assesses the need for gypsy and travel sites. I am minded that they are a hugely rural area, and to be in a position such as the county council is without any recognised stopping place is absolutely unfathomable for an area the size of Stratford and Warwickshire. So I definitely support the recommendation that we stress as consultees that they get their gypsy and travel sites and assessment sorted.
You will have no argument from me, Councillor Ryan. Absolutely. So that
Where do we say that? Sorry, it's really again. Where do we actually say that in the recommendation?
3.4.2 talks about it.
4.2.
Yeah, 4.2.
yeah. So we'll be stressing that point. I mean, and I think the way I read it really was that Stratford have got a local plan, Warwick have got a local plan, and they are, because of their proposed strategic alliance, they're joining up, or they want to, so therefore they're joining their local plan up so they can speak as one corporately. But yeah, there are a few glaring omissions from their local plan, or from either of their local plans, which are now joining together, and we need to point those omissions out to them strongly. Yeah. Okay, so I'll move the recommendation from the chair, seconded by Councillor Simpson. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Item number 16 is the West Midlands Strategic Employment Study, May 2021. The report provides information from the recently published West Midlands Strategic Employment Study, which was commissioned by the three LEPs and Staffordshire County Council. A study in 2015 recommended further work to be carried out to determine the amount and location of strategic employment sites. So although this recent study provides up-to-date evidence that sites are needed, it doesn't provide the detail required to say further work will be required. So then I think we need to respond positively to this, and therefore it's recommended further work be undertaken to ensure that the conclusions of the latest report are robust, how local authorities might develop policies to deal with the issue. Any comments? Question, Councillor.
I was just going to wonder how much input did we have in putting it together in the first place? I know it was the Coventry and Warwickshire LEP and the other LEPs as well, but is this imposed on us effectively, or did we have some input into identifying where these sites are?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think we have very little input, which is why we're having the input now. Yes, Councillor Bell.
Well, it's along those lines, really. At under 5 on the Greenbelt review, I'm really concerned about this could support the release of land from the Greenbelt. We've already had Greenbelt stolen from us. To do the Greenbelt review and put some more of it back. We're always going to feel the pressure because of the amount of Greenbelt we've got in North Warwickshire, but it is the only green space with surrounded by all sorts of stuff that's not green space. So, you know, I am concerned about that. And then I was really taken aback on 7.4, 800 hectares. It is 4 times as big as saying that we might be that much more. Is that what it's saying? I just think that is. I'm not good with hectares, but when they say it's twice as much or 3 times as much as something we've already got, I can get a picture. And I don't like the picture, it's too big. So, I mean, I don't know what the status of this is. Can we say, gosh, we've really got concerns, or we just got to say, got to adopt it?
Councillor Simpson.
Chair, I'm sure everyone will be very surprised here that I don't like this report. I really don't like the recommendations. You know, from what members have said, you know, as far as I am aware, this report was commissioned by a group of people that did not include us. Okay, we to an extent have a seat on the lap, but that's as far as it goes. This is an opportunity for other people to talk about how much of North Warwickshire they'd like to develop, and therefore it is unwelcome. To my mind, the recommendation is entirely wrong. We are agreeing to undertake items 1, 2 and 3. And then once we've agreed to determine the level of land to be delivered in North Warwickshire, we'll have a further report back to talk about the next steps. Surely we've already taken the next steps. I think we should be having a further report so that we can understand the context of what this report is, what its legal implications are for us, how we can decide to agree with it or disagree with it. And then, you know, I might want to look at what the level of land to be required in North Warwickshire is. I fundamentally understand that as time goes on, we have to do recommendation A2. We do need to determine the amount of industrial land, you know, but that's for us to do. I am concerned about the implications area, as it talks about in 3. But to be honest with you, for me, Chairman, A2 is way too premature. Until I have more information on what this study is, what its legal standing is, what we have to do as a result of it, I don't want in any way us to start making a determination over the future amount of industrial land to be delivered in North Warwickshire is in connection with this study. We have to make our determination of it, agreed. But I don't want that in any way linked to this report. That's a standalone decision for us. And particularly, as Councillor Bell says, this suggestion in here that the next step will be to carve up the greenbelt and decide how much of the greenbelt we're going to give to industrial land. We may well do that. But I don't want any lawyers to read this report and say, well, you had sight of what this report said. You understood what it was saying. And as a recommendation following this study, you decided to look at how much land was available in North Warwickshire. There's a causal link, which I don't want to see. I am always concerned about these sub-regional studies. We lose out of every one of them. And this is an extremely slippery slope, which frankly, I'm more than happy to have another report, but I'm sorry, Chairman, I can't vote for this.
Okay. Councillor Riley and then Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just to support positions that Councillor Simpson and Councillor Bell have eloquently explained, and particularly to support those conditions in the light of the main modification 40 from the planning inspector, which sets out our commitment and our requirement in terms of delivering sites, particularly recognising that we have notable motorway junctions at junction 4 of the M6, junction 9 of the M42, junction 10 of the M42, junction 11 of the M42, which if we're not careful will turn into nothing but industrial complexes, which will further exacerbate the traffic movement problems that we've already experienced at those key locations because the infrastructure is not good enough.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers.
Yes, I'm not sure that we can or should be pulling back from recommendation A2. After all, we sent in our main modifications, and that on that basis, as with other main modifications, the inspector has now ruled our plan sound. And that does give us a significant commitment, if you like, to taking these strategic employment sites forward. And the recommendation just talks about further work be commissioned to. In other words, we haven't made a decision about what quantum of land is going to be required. We just have given a commitment to commission further work to understand that. I mean, I'm totally with Councillor Simpson that, you know, the background detail on some of this, and particularly around Junction 9, is a real mystery to me in terms of what is going to be required there. And we do need to know more. I'm curious as to which forum this kind of issue gets debated. I'd imagine it would be the LDF. So it's come again without much real in-depth understanding of what the report said or and so on. So I suppose what I'm saying is I think what's being committed to is just further work in the form that being commissioned to determine the quantum, and we may be slightly overreacting, particularly given that we have already given back evidence and commitment to the inspector, and on that basis, as well as a lot of others, he's ruled our plan sound. If we rescind that commitment now as MM40, then surely we are going to run into difficulties when it comes to the full council in September.
Okay, can I bring the chief exec and then perhaps?
Yes, I think we're in the happy position of everybody being right, which is always a nice way to start. So yes, this is a live issue that has been discussed at the local plan. The issue of there needing to be additional employment land across the West Midlands was a live debate, and hence the modification 40 that Councillor Riley talked about in terms of setting up criteria for that to be dealt with. If it assists, and I'm looking to Dorothy particularly, we could explicitly take out number 2. If we added then to B, a further report brought back to the board to discuss next steps, including what steps the council should then take. Because it's quite clear in terms of our approach to this that this is a live issue, and it's not the first time we've come across this. As I said, it's been through the inquiry as well, and it's important that we do deal with it positively to ensure that we are moving towards a process of how we will engage in this. But if it's the issue of determining through the commissioning of the report of the work the quantum of land, then I'm quite happy to move that in effect into B by saying, well, then it's good, well, then take the decision. That's what I'll say. Dorothy, does that cause you any concerns from a technical?
No, I think we could live with that. I do think, though, that having seen the report, and it does identify potentially over 800 hectares, we should be actively looking to see how much of that 800 hectares we actually want to support, if any, because I think the new policy LP6A in the local plan, as it's coming forward, does actually give a slight open door to people who are promoting these sites. And the last thing we want is all of those sites actually coming forward as applications. It would be better if we were in control of that, and so that if there was an actual quantum that we could actually determine, that we could then actually say, no, it's past that quantum. That one's a definite no. But I do understand totally the concerns. But the other report has been around in 2015. So we do need to actively and positively take it forward. But I'm happy with the change.
Through Chair, could I just check that consider the implications area? Does that include? Does the implications area include the sites identified on the map?
Yes, it would, because we're not sure as to what they've taken into account in terms of the East Midlands, and there's an awful lot of things that are happening just on the edge of us. There's a new site at Blaby. There's land south of Hinckley. There's the Junction 11. So all of those need to be taken into account, in my opinion, and should be part and parcel of this. But Highways England is going to be a key player, because if they actually say that's it, there's nothing can be done there, then that would be a major step.
Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys.
I was just looking at the map. It says that existing allocated sites, we can't see it properly because of the scale of the map. In fact, it's all in black and white. Market identified sites, which implies to me that developers have identified those. And then there are other ones which I find quite ironic, identified junction sites. And when you look at it, they've got a blob on every junction. So, so basically, wherever they could get access, that's where they want to be. One thing I was going to ask Dorothy, is it possible It's about location, and being on the motorway junctions is where they're going to be. Would that be? I would imagine they're going to have a bigger push to go into those areas. They need to say, take for example an area like Door Mill. They're going to be right where they want to get on top of it. Does that mean that they would put more pressure on that, and we would have to give in to those sort of demands? And I'm thinking of Junction 11 at the moment. I've already seen a plan from Junction 11. We've already built on, as we like to, Modwin's call it now, the empty quadrant. But up at Junction 11, which is not in Warwickshire, there's 3 empty quadrants. How far do we go? That's so now. How far can we defend it? Thank you.
If I could just say that is a major concern, because the major ones that we have are Junction 4 as well. We're very close to Junction 3 of the M6 as well. So there's so many motorway junctions that they've actually highlighted. And as you say, there's 4 quadrants potentially to those. Similar to what we have at Junction 10, you've got now the 3 quadrants actually taken up with development, and that's actually just increased the pressure on the area of restraint or the strategic gap in that north-eastern section. And so, yes, it is a major concern.
Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Chairman. I think I agree with an awful lot of what's been said. And generally, the ones made out, I absolutely agree. We have at some stage to determine the quantum of employment-related land. There's an undoubted requirement to do that. It's how you do it. Chairman, I am not aware, in all honesty, over the last God knows how many years I've been on this council, of any report or study that was commissioned that did not lead directly to a policy. And the sole justification, it's a circuitous argument. You have to have a study, and the study tells you what to do, and you have to do it because the study has told you what to do it. The important question for me at this stage, which none of this recommendation deals with, I do not fundamentally have a clear picture of what we are required to do in law. I couldn't, frankly, I'm trying to think of a polite way of saying it, but I don't really care what this study says. It's irrelevant to me. What I'm interested in, what does the law require us to do? I know the government keeps changing the goalposts in terms of duty to cooperate in planning control and spatial planning and what have you. To begin with, before we start determining the quantum of land, before we start understanding the strategic employment land provision, I'm happy enough to understand what East Midlands is doing, I suppose. But 2 and 3, I don't understand the question yet that we're asking. I don't understand the legal implications behind that. But what I do understand is whatever report we get, as sure as eggs is eggs, will be translated into an obligation to do something. And I don't want to be giving up any more greenbelt land, where these blocks are, unless there is a clear obligation to do it in law, not something that the WMES study decides is a good opportunity for other people. For me, I'm sort of happy enough with A1. If 2 and 3 is rolled into B, I become more comfortable with it. But legally, I don't want any causal link at all to this study leading to what we choose to do in terms of our investigations to provide the basis of our policy. I'm not a lawyer, but I genuinely understand that, although I could say, look, you made that recommendation on a report that was titled West Midlands Strategic Employment Study, May 2021. You must have had that report in your mind. You must have been aware of what it says and what the recommendations set out at item 6 of that report said. How can I distinguish between that report, those unacceptable recommendations, particularly as far as Greenbelt is concerned, and yet still have something which enables us to consider properly what the quantum of land requirement is going to be? And until I've got a legal understanding over what the status of this study is, and separately, what our obligations are, I genuinely don't feel happy rushing out commissioning anything.
Okay. Councillor Chambers.
So I don't want to prolong this, but I do think we should refer to what's said in paragraph 7.3, which essentially gives the background and the commitment as part of the hearings on our local plan that we were going to take account of the evidence that was demonstrating an immediate need for employment land or a certain type of employment land, and to take note of, first of all, the study that was done in 2015 or a successor study. I mean, Councillor Simpson may be asking about the legal requirement. We have a requirement in terms of our commitment through these hearings and through the then judgment of the inspector that our plan was sound, to take account of these studies and to try and find employment land. So, you know, here representations were made. The local plan inspector considered the issue. It was made clear at the time by officers, I assume, that the council did not want a policy, but the local plan inspector has ruled that we should have one, and that's what it is. It's MM40, and it's now a new policy on LP6A. We have a commitment. It may not be legally binding, but we have got to take it forward.
Well, I'm not sure I see any contradiction between what Councillor Chambers is saying and what I've said.
No. Chief Exec.
If it helps. So yes, we are fixed with the issue of there being a wider than North Warwickshire need for employment. So that issue has been kicking around for quite a while because of 2015, because it's there anyway, and also because of the report that we commissioned as part of the North Authority Company in 2015. So that's the legal obligation. That's the task to meet, and that's how the inspection said we ought to meet it. But it's clear that you are not. It's very clear from this report, you are not adopting or agreeing with the recommendations of the Strategic Employment Study. What you're saying is you have a study that has said there is a need for more employment. Well, right, you knew that already. It then tells you, this is an important point, goes to what Councillor Aldridge is talking about, in terms of, it tells you what the market would do and where it works. But there is then a whole issue of, well, how does that fit with planning policy? And that's all A3 is seeking to do, is to look at where the market would want to go, and for us, frankly, to assess whether or not that's appropriate because of highways issues and because of policy issues, strategic gap and the green belt. So I'm quite happy with 3 to come in. If you don't consider the implications areas, conversely, you're more or less saying you're happy with that implication area. I'd much rather consider that than any suggestion that we wave that through. So I personally would tactically keep that in. But it just tells you what the market wants. What we need to do is work out what our response would be, albeit, as has been said a couple of times, and then 40 gives us some way to do that anyway. We need to progress that in order for us to show whether or not the highways can accommodate it and what impact it has on our policies around the strategic gap and green belt. So there's a tactical issue here in terms of engaging with it positively and shaping it and retreating from it and saying we don't want anything to do with it. You don't have that last option.
Okay. Councillor Simpson.
I think we are, to an extent, all saying the same thing in slightly different words. I am perhaps more wary of it than the Chief Executive and Councillor Chambers. But I'll say for about the 5th time, I'm abundantly clear there is a requirement for us to look at the need for employment. It's how do we phrase that question and on what legal basis are we asking it? I am, Chairman, very wary because all the way through my experience of planning, everything is based on the evidence. The evidence is collected in certain ways and answers questions. You need to be abundantly clear over what question you're asking and how you collect that evidence, because it will lead to different nuances. Now, I think the Chief Executive was telling me that the report is clear that we can go to recommendation B, including A2 and A3, and that there is no causal link between our decision making and that report. I'm happy to take that legal advice if that's what he's telling me. And I'm happy that we have a full report telling us how we can go into the determination of the quantum plan and how we should consider the implications that this report is doing. But if that's where we're going, and we have clear blue water between how we determine our policy going forward, how we address what the inspector has said, and this study, then I'm comfortable with it. But I have the memory of an elephant on things like this, and I am not going to forget where we might end up. And because, I don't want us ever to be faced with situations like this drawing. Okay, frankly, whatever they paid for this report, any schoolboy could have told you where developers want to put these sites. We've known forever they want to put them on the edges of motorways because it's easier. Mm. Unfortunately for them, in North Yorkshire, that's pretty much in the Greenbelt, and which leads to their understandable requirement that, well, you want to do away with that, don't you, so that we can make more money out of it. We have to be clear on this. And if we can distinguish this report from where we're going in the future and from how we, as an authority, deal with what the inspector has said, then that's fine. But I just really, really don't want this to feature in any way in our thinking. We could be aware of it, but we have to make our own determination, not based on what these developers have told us they'd like to do.
Sorry, I don't want to. So I think the first thing I need to say is that if any of these sites come forward for a planning application and they're granted either by yourselves or on appeal, then I don't want that to be linked back to this advice, because that's out there anyway. So the desire of individuals to get planning permission on these sites in our area and elsewhere is not a product of this report or our consideration. What we're saying is this report's happened. It says there's a need, and it says where the market would do. It's then up to us to put the case together to argue whether or not we want them there or the reasons why we do or why we don't. And so it strengthens our position. But I can't give you a guarantee that whether you take this work or indeed if you don't take this work, you get applications in and they may be looked on favourably on appeal, if not in this chamber. What we're saying is the best chance to get as close to the position as you want is to engage with it and take some work to try and shape it to your planning policies is in essence what we're saying. But please don't quote back any suggestion that I said that work would stop you getting planning applications in your appeal positions.
Chairman, and that's a sector fact. We'll get whatever applications somebody chooses to make. Well, the point I'm trying to make is I don't want anyone to say that we have favourably considered that report. That's the distinction. But I'm happy, Chairman, that we consider how we approach that study and what questions we are asking to form the evidence base.
And Chairman, in addition, we've got several minutes of footage of YouTube that makes it very clear what was in members' minds when you made that decision, which is a feature that we haven't previously had. So it's very clear that we are not adopting this plan. We accept there's a quantum, but it's not as simple as just saying this is where we want it. We need to set out the implications for our spatial vision and also the practicalities about whether it can be done as a plan was concerned. So yes, it's very clear in that feature.
Okay, so I think, following that advice from the Chief Exec is under no illusion how we are feeling, and therefore, and is also confident that the recommendation as it stands will achieve what we want to achieve.
As amended, so we're taking two out, and saying, adding, including what steps the council should take, should then take. That's
And that's that. So that everybody's happy with that.
Chairman, could you please read out the new recommendations then
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So it would be A, that further work with Commission 2, and then 1 as printed. Delete 2. 3 then becomes 2, and as printed. B then says a further report will be brought back to the board to discuss next steps. And this is a new bit, including what steps the council should then take.
Okay. Well, I shall move that recommendation from the chair and seconded by Councillor Simpson. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions?
Before you go off, can I just ask Dorothy? That map shows you the 3 LEPs where we're concerned, but we have a monster next door, you know, with East Midlands as a LEP as well. And I just wondered, have you got anything that you could let us see how that rolls up against the side of us? Because I'm just thinking of what's happened to Hinckley recently, you know, by the Hinckley Island, the amount that's going on there. And I've also know there's plans going in for 300 houses in Measham to support the new site. It's chicken and egg when it comes to new industrial sites come immediately. People want to put houses with them because they've got to support the workers. So we could be chasing our own tail here if all of these sort of things happen. So do we have anything on file which looks at the other side of the A5?
We did produce some information, the examination. So, right.
Could you send a copy of that, please?
But I mean, Chair,
Yeah, I can get.
in terms of,
Yes.
we need to establish just quite where this works, because there may be provision made in these Midlands which satisfies a notion. Exactly, yeah. And so it just to be boundary blind in that sense.
Yeah, can you just provide the report, Dorothy, because you know, I'm conscious of the fact we have just finished that item.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Item number 17 is the Financial Management Code. Excuse me, the Chartered Institute of Financial Accountancy, SIPFA, has issued a financial management code which all the local authorities are required to comply with. This will help authorities to strengthen financial management and decision making. So the Corporate Director of Resources has assessed that compliance and identified a few areas where improvements could be made. The assessment is summarised in the appendix. Any comments, questions?
Move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Riley. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous, thank you. Excuse me. Item 18 is the exclusion of the public interest. I move that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the remaining item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by Schedule 12A to the Act, namely the financial or business affairs of any person, and it remains the public interest that this item stays private as disclosure would compromise progress with the matter concerned.
Second.
All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you.